You're now listening to Sanity at the Movies, AFI Backwards Countdown Edition. Yay!
Yay!
I'm Nathan. This is Jake.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Jake. He's pastor. And we talk about movies on Sanity at the Movies. And we decided that we're doing so many things, Jake.
All the things.
In addition to doing our Disney Princess Countdown, which we're doing one of those a month, we need to fill another slot. And we thought a lot of times there'd be like a new movie out or something that was new to Netflix or something that maybe reflected the thing that we were watching or informed it. So we thought there would be lots of things like that, and I'm sure that there will. But some months there might not be a thing like that.
Yep.
And so in order to fill that gap, we thought we'd just go from 100 to 1 on the AFI's list of the greatest American movies ever made.
Yep.
And so that's what we're doing. And I don't know what edition of that list we're using. I think we're using the latest one.
Okay.
Maybe. Do you know?
No, I didn't look. You just told me what movie was number 100 and I went with it.
AFI 100 years, 100 movies list. I will tell you folks what list we are going with. We are going with the one that is listed as list in Wikipedia. Okay, we're going with the original list, I guess.
Okay,
how about that?
The original list.
The original list, yes.
None of these updated lists for us.
Nope, we're going with the one that came out originally, whenever that was. 1998, I guess.
So we won't have any movies of the last 20 plus years.
No, I guess not. I don't know. Maybe we'll end up reverting to the newer list. Or maybe they probably only changed around like a few items, so we could incorporate those.
They had to fit Avatar in there.
They had to get Avatar in there. Miss Congeniality.
10 Things I Hate About You.
10 Things I Hate About You. All the great American classics. Failure to Launch. My wife tried to make me watch Failure to Launch with Matthew McConaughey and Sarah Jessica Parker the other day.
Okay, then.
We only made it about 10 minutes, and then she turned it off because she said it was too stupid. But
you made her feel bad about it.
Yeah.
You made her feel bad about a movie that she enjoyed and wanted to enjoy with you.
And I was on my phone and not paying attention and grumpy. I felt really bad. But the badness that I felt was mitigated by the fact that I wasn't watching Failure to Launch. So I was kind of in a bind. I've saddened my wife and not been a loving husband. But on the other hand, I'm not watching Failure to Launch. So,
you give with one hand, you take with the other.
Yeah. Anyway, folks, we are doing the 100th film. So the film that the AFI thought was maybe the least deserving of being on their list, but still better than thousands of other American movies, and a film that I am very fond of personally, 1942's Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Yep.
Jake, what baggage did you bring to Yankee Doodle Dandy? Did you know about this movie? Had you seen this movie?
I had not seen this movie. I didn't really know about it. I know the song, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Right.
So, I think you said it, and I probably started singing it.
Yeah, I think you did.
You told me it was a Cagney film, and I thought, that's weird. And a musical, and I thought, that's weird. I think of Cagney as a tough guy.
The gangster.
The gangster of gangsters in all the gangster movies. I don't think of him as the lead in a musical. Weird. Okay. So that's the baggage I brought to the movie itself. The rest of my baggage is just being a good old Midwestern American boy brought up on love of my country and
on a scale of 1 to an eagle with a machine gun.
Yes.
How much would you say you love America, Jake?
That's a bad question.
Is that a bad question?
It's a bad question. It depends on how you want to define love for America.
Oh, well, why don't you define it for us?
Well, G.K. Chesterton once said, my country, right or wrong, is like saying my mother, drunk or sober. Mm-hmm. And our country has been drunk out of her mind for a long time. So do I love the idea of America?
Mm-hmm.
Do I love
freedom, democracy?
Deep down in my bones.
Apple pie, mother.
Absolutely. Deep down in my bones. Do I feel very patriotic at the present time? No, not very patriotic. At the same time, we live in a country that...
Abortion, the export, the homegrown and exportation of pornography.
It's America's job to promote wickedness around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's gross.
And it's disturbing and scary. And I am a Christian before I'm an American. And that's that. So yeah, it's hard to, when you consider all of those things, to have a whole lot of patriotism about you.
On the other hand, freedom of speech is pretty good.
Freedom of speech is pretty good. Wouldn't want to live anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, iPhones are nice.
iPhones are nice. Air conditioning is nice. You could take the poorest segment of the American population, form them into a country, and they would still be one of the richest nations on earth currently, much less when you consider historically what standards of living have been like. And so it's a pretty amazing, unreal place to live. I'm very grateful for it. I'm grateful to be here, even with everything else.
Yeah, I live maybe 3 minutes from Walmart, and something that occurs to me frequently is, wow, Xerxes of Persia and Louis XIV and, King Henry VIII. They would have killed.
They would have marshaled their armies in order to have access to the treasuries.
Yeah, the wonderland of everything that I want.
You can find at Walmart. It's true.
It is true.
It is true.
So you have to be careful, I think, before...
send people on dangerous, perilous journeys to the Indies to come back with pepper.
Right. Marco Polo, if he walked into Walmart...
He'd be like, what the heck?
Yeah, what was I doing? Wow.
Marco Polo made it possible.
Marco Polo did make it possible, as did, I'm sure, some of those other gentlemen that I mentioned one way or another. But, so thank you, Xerxes. Thank you, Leo the 14th.
The Pope?
The Pope, yeah. Was Leo the 14th the really famous one? I know Leo
the 10th was the Medici that was Pope during Luther's time.
Right, yeah. I knew there was a famous Leo in there. Well, listen, Jake, I love America. I bleed red, white, and blue. And
you and Stone Huntington.
Me and Stone Huntington. No, obviously I'm being silly. I agree with everything that you've said, both the good things and the bad things. But I do admit to my heart starting to flutter just a bit when I watch a silly movie like this one that's all about a patriot. And
I did not know how deep it ran. Mm-hmm. I did not know how much that coal of the fires of patriotism that were stoked in my youth still existed deep down in my soul.
So why don't, for someone because I bet a lot of our listeners probably don't even know what this movie is, could you kind of maybe explain what they would be in for if they watch this movie, what the story is exactly?
It's the story of George Michael Cohen, man born on the 4th of July and responsible for many of the songs that you think of as like the cheesy, patriotic, you're a grand old flag.
Grand Old Flag would be probably the one that's had the longest shelf life. Over there, Yankee Doodle Dandy. Also just a lot of other things in the American songbook that aren't specifically about America.
But that feel very...
Give my regards to Broadway.
Gives sound to and shape to the feeling of what is America, what makes America.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a real guy that lived in the early 20th century. And in 1942, they made I never know whether the way I pronounce this word is the way that it should be pronounced. Biopic?
Yes, it is biopic because I always pronounced it biopic and was convinced, and I think that it might have even been with you.
Yeah, I know we've had this conversation on mic before.
I know that I was wrong. I always want to say biopic. Yeah,
I can never remember which one of us is wrong.
Biopic sounds gauche. And
biopic sounds like a medical procedure, though.
It does, but you proved me wrong, and...
Okay, I did not set this up just so you could eat crow in front of the world.
No, it's okay, The
only thing we're dining on today is eagle, my friend.
That's right.
That makes it sound like
that's terrible.
We're the Russians or something. Today we dine on eagle. No.
Turkey, maybe.
Yeah, turkey. The only thing we are dining on is apple pie.
That's right. Pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie, mama, and apple pie. Yeah, so this is a story of...
In baseball.
Yeah, in baseball, yeah. We'll be dining on baseball today. This is a story of George M. Cohen, and it's a very inspiring, patriotic story, at least the way they tell it in the movie.
Yeah, that's, self-made American boy who had a great family, but also had to be self-made. And
it's a very generic, I don't know.
It does play into the myth of genius.
Yes.
The idea that, a person of special talent stumbles onto the right vibe, the right feel at the right time, and is just like, he's got it all. He's got the magic touch. He sits down and what does he he pens one or two of his songs like in a 30-minute stretch, in 30 minutes in order to impress somebody. And, he's just got the touch.
He's got the magic touch.
He's on the wavelength. He is the living embodiment of the American spirit at that time. And he's just trying to bottle as much of it as he can.
Yeah, I think somebody says something like, he's got the whole country stuffed down his trousers or something like that.
Which is something like that.
People are always saying that about him in the movie. And the idea is that he is the embodiment. He combines everything. Like, he's a man of the people. There's a section where he writes a play. So he's a Broadway songwriter.
He's a Broadway songwriter. And he grew up traveling the country with, the four Coens.
The four Coens. His dad's like little vaudeville.
Mom, dad, and sister is a little, like a vaudeville act, leaning into their Irish heritage. At least this is how the movie presents. I don't really know anything that the movie didn't teach me about George Coen.
Right.
But how the movie presents it is, traveling place to place, the whole country, east to west, north to south, every part of it, every city, every frontier place as it pops up. The Coens hit it.
Yeah, it's the world of kind of coming out of the old Western medicine men into what we think of as kind of the New York vaudeville, Catskill Mountains kind of performers on trains showing up, a little bit of a huckster.
Yeah.
Oh, brother, where art thou? Kind of a vibe to it.
Absolutely.
But and if you can sing, if you can dance, if you can juggle, if you have any kind of talent, you can.
It's the kind of thing that the Coen brothers make fun of in one of their sketches in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Yes.
The saddest one, actually.
That one is really sad.
Let us never speak of this again.
Yeah.
Maybe the second saddest one.
I think the one with the
girl,
the one called The Gal Who Got Rattled, is pretty darn sad.
That's pretty sad. Yeah. Yeah, that's the saddest one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea is that, he's this super talented kid. They hone their act here and there. They have chances to make big breaks as a family, but good old George,
through his pride and
arrogance, even as a young child, ends up getting himself and the family blackballed time and time again. And so by the time he becomes an adult and really is brimming with all these ideas, he's blackballed and he's got to figure out how to make it anyway.
Right. Which, spoiler, he does through a combination of moxie and good old American can-do spirit, and a lot of huckster, clever deceit of the type that we really enjoy watching Hollywood people do in Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
And I looked up the story of George M. Coen, and it's not dissimilar to the way the family, so I think there's like a birth certificate that says he was born on July 3rd. Apparently the Coens always did say that he was born on July 4th. So it's kind of like that. He was enough of a self-mythologizer as a dude that it's really hard to actually tell what the difference, where the legend ends and where the truth ends and the legend continues.
And that's true of a lot of, anybody that wants to play into that idea of either being the quintessential self-made American or the genius has to engage in a lot of self-mythologizing. And he's got to always be selling the myth of, his origin and his reality to the world.
Right. And this was the golden age. I think in the movie they even say this was the age of Horatio Alger or whatever. And Horatio Alger, if anybody doesn't know, was the guy that wrote all these cheesy stories in the late 1800s about young American men making their fortune and coming from rags to riches. I think Horatio Alger invented rags to riches as a genre.
Rags to riches, the Horatio Alger story.
Right.
That's the thing.
That's the thing. And George M. Coen's story.
It's a regular Horatio Alger story.
Right. That kind of optimism, that kind of American can-do spirit. That's certainly, but I couldn't find a lot of things that the movie...
And Broadway and Hollywood were packaging and selling that like crazy.
And...
if you think of any, just pick a musical, pick Singing in the Rain, what is it? That whole big, weird, bizarre sequence in the middle, gotta dance, he's going to go and knock on every door, and he packed his bags from the Midwest, he's going to New York, because if he can make it there, he can make it anywhere, just like Frankie sang, and, gotta dance, and then finally, he makes it big, because of course he does, because that's what you do.
That's what you do. If you've got I keep saying the word moxie, which I'll probably never use outside of this exact conversation. But if you have the moxie, if you got the moxie kid, if you got the can-do spirit,
It's a whole world of opportunities out there.
Yep, exactly. Well,
come on, buy the Brooklyn Bridge. Why don't you, only $1.
Right. Well, what I like about these kinds of stories, I actually like it when biopics in particular take the form of, and it's hard for them to kind of avoid this, but when they take the form of whatever the story or mythology that the person perpetuated, like if you're going to tell the Johnny Cash story, then you might as well make it into this Southern country fried.
The Man in Black
emerges from the Dust Bowl kind of story. Whether that's
tell
true
the
or
story
not.
Of Steve Jobs, you might as well.
Same thing. It's and so George M. Cohan, who was called the man who owned Broadway, he invented a lot of these tropes and these cliches, these, rags to riches, feel good type stories, all American stories. And so let's just make his story into that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you enjoy this movie, Jake?
Yeah, I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it. I was really, really impressed by Cagney.
Oh, he's great. Had you seen him in anything before?
I don't think so. If I have, I don't have the memory of it. I just was really impressed by everything about him.
If people haven't seen Cagney, I think the best handle maybe to think of him, although even this is getting to be an old reference these days, but Jack Nicholson, I think, is the modern Cagney. That level of energy, that level of just devilish likability, that level of...
He's got some real verve and just... He works, like he shines.
He's always inventing these little pieces of business. There's a scene where they basically trick a producer into putting on their plays, and at the end of it, Cagney just leans over and kisses him on the hat.
Yeah.
And
there are always these little touches that just like feels... I just felt like I was watching an inspired performance. I did not think of him as a singer or a dancer.
No.
And he dances out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
Like they weren't pulling their punches. They weren't like doing camera tricks. Like
no Ryan Gosling in La La Land.
None of that stuff. No, he can dance.
Mm-hmm.
Like he can sing. He does a lot of sing-speak stuff, but he sells it really well.
And the thing that I didn't know and learned in looking up some stuff about this is Cohen's style was apparently he's doing Cohen
style.
So it's possible even that Cagney, I think Cagney he wasn't a great singer, but I think he's leaning into the speak sing thing because that's Cohen. And I listened to a little Cohen and it is
very much that.
It is very much that. So even the places where it seems like he's just furiously acting his way through the performance aspects, it's actually the same thing that George M. Cohen did. So, and that weird stiff-legged, amazing dance style is, I guess, pretty similar to Cohen's style.
I just thought it was a very different kind of performance than I had seen, but it was legit in its own right. And I loved him. I loved him in that movie. It's a lot of fun. He's
a really fun, just dynamic performer. I can think of few performers who are more dynamic than him. He is just a ball of tightly wound energy. I should say Jack Nicholson he's similar, but he's much more laconic. Jack Nicholson he's much more laid back. Imagine Jack Nicholson like on coke or something like that.
Right. Well, what I was wanting to compare him to, Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh, Brando?
Yeah, thanks. But I was wanting to compare him to Marlon Brando, but without being so sexual and more talented.
Yeah.
I don't know how to... I think it was just like that, the sense of energy and verve.
Yeah, just the life force, the potency inside this.
There was a real potency there that I think few actors, Gene Kelly maybe, but both Gene Kelly and Marlon Brando have this sort of sexual, animalistic almost vibe going on. And he doesn't, but he does have real verve.
Well, I think he did for the time. Like, I'm sure it's probably some of it's just the era that he's not.
He had to play more subdued than
his famous thing in. So he made his name in a movie called The Public Enemy, which was one of the first gangster talkies. The very first gangster talkie, which Warner Brothers built their studio on, was called Little Caesar, and that features Edward G. Robinson, who talked like this. See, and he's like who we think of when we think of gangsters. But actually, the really popular gangster performer was Cagney, and in The Public Enemy, he made his career through a scene, if I'm remembering rightly, where this dumb blonde bimbo is being insulting to him, and he just like jumps out of his chair, grabs a grapefruit, smashes it in her face, and then grabs her by the hair and drags her out of the Like Cagney everybody loved that and made his career. And then he was
typecast.
He was typecast.
Yeah.
But he's the kind of guy that's so innately likable that you just love to root for him as a gangster. And then, of course, he has to die in, the ninth reel. But until then, you just want to see him machine gun down his enemies and get all the girls. And it's wish fulfillment.
Isn't he like if you've not watched a bunch of like old gangster, noir type movies, isn't he like the kind of thing that like the Angels with Filthy Souls and Home Alone stuff is made to?
Oh, absolutely. That's just Cagney. Yeah. That's exactly. I don't know why they didn't just license
some Cagney films.
A Cagney film. I mean, they wanted the right dialogue for their thing. Yeah. But that guy's just doing
a Cagney film. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And probably his best gangster movie is called White Heat. And in that one, he's this psychopathic gangster who really loves his mother. And it ends with him on top of like a giant propane tank that's blowing up and he's screaming. And it's one of those things that's so iconic. I maybe actually be remembering it as more exciting than it actually was. But what I want to say is he's firing his machine gun into the air and saying, "Made it, Ma! I'm on top of the world, Ma!" as the thing explodes around him. So he's just a really cool, vibrant performer and had a lot of fights with the studio, was kind of this larger than life guy that didn't necessarily like playing gangsters. I think came up doing some of the dancing and having a broader array of skills that he had honed on, but people really liked him as a street tough talking, fast talking kind of a guy. But I think he really embraced the chance to do something a little different in this one and I think this is his best movie. This is what he's really actually remembered for, I guess people remember him as a gangster performer, but if they've seen anything, they've probably seen Yankee Doodle Dandy because it's such a fun movie. I guess the only other thing that's kind of interesting to know about the movie is that Cagney actually didn't like George M. Cohan. I guess George M. Cohan had sided...
Like the man or his music or what?
He didn't like what the man stood for because at some point George M. Cohan sided against the actors and some kind of an actors strike, sided with the producers, as you can imagine he would because he was a producer primarily, although he did act in his stuff as portrayed in the movie. But so Cagney never liked that. But then Cagney was named by this guy named John L. Leach, who was the chief functionary of the Los Angeles Communist Party. He named Cagney to the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1940. They were like front page news, giant headlines, Cagney associated with communism, all this stuff. Yeah. And so Cagney felt really bad about that, felt backed into a corner by that, managed to clear his name. But then he just said, I want to do the most American patriotic. There's some quote by Cagney's brother, who was actually his producer, who said something like, we're going to give them the most damnedest patrioticist movie that you can think of. So
it's right up there.
Yeah, this movie's really laying it on for all kinds of reasons. I guess the other thing to remember is this movie was made in 1942, which two interesting things about that. Number one, World War II is going full steam. So this is very much a piece of propaganda, pro-American propaganda. That's one of the conscious reasons the movie was made. Number two, 1942 is just considered one of the great years of cinema. The Hollywood machine was chugging along, and Casablanca comes from that year. This is by the same director and a couple of the same writers as Casablanca. So they actually made those two movies within the same space of time. And they're completely different movies, but you can feel a lot of the same energy, a lot of the same wit, a lot of the same just colorful, awesome, everything that was good about the high polished to a nice gloss Hollywood system of writing and producing and directing is on display in this movie, Yankee Doodle Dandy, which we will talk through now. So we got the credits. They're in American flag type font.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It's amazing.
And then we have quite possibly the dumbest wraparound story for any biopic.
Well, the president wants to see you. Oh, dear.
Oh, no. What have I done?
Now we have the movie announcer talking over somebody who vaguely looks like FDR
right
from behind.
Old man George M. Cohan, as played by Cagney, in okay old man makeup. Although he
takes it off because he was.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So because it actually is kind of weird and convoluted. It starts with him playing the character of FDR in a play.
That's right.
And then he takes off the FDR makeup.
Yeah.
And then he's called by the real FDR, who's played by the back of some actor.
Yeah.
And he goes to see him. Runs into the old black gentleman, the butler at the White House, who worked his special shift just to
be able to meet him.
And then you're right, the president. I didn't bother looking up the real FDR's voice. I know I've heard it before. I've heard fireside chats and stuff, but like I don't think he sounded quite as much like a movie announcer.
He sounds very much like a movie announcer.
Welcome to the White House, Mr. Cohen. It's the flashback structure for biopics is pretty ubiquitous. It'll be like Johnny Cash is about to go on stage to collect an award or something, and he's gonna.
Now we're gonna flash back to the time he won his first award.
Right, exactly. There's always something like that. But
he was 8 years old, and it was the local talent show.
Right, and then his brother died. But this has got to be the worst because then in. George M. Cohen proceeds to waste the president's time.
He's just sitting there telling him his whole life story. So conceited.
Oh, man. But then we get all
he has to do these things like, well, I guess you didn't really want to hear that. Oh, yes, I find it very interesting. Please tell me more.
But then it has the gall to start with, well, I guess I always carried an American flag or followed one, and I'm going to take you back to my town in the Horatio Alger story and small town America and Civil War march.
Of course, I guess we should start with my father. He was an Irishman.
And then you have Walter Houston, grandfather of Angelica Houston, father of John Houston. Wonderful. Just another really likable character actor. Most famous as the old prospector in Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Also pretty famous for playing the devil, the titular devil in The Devil and Daniel Webster. And he can dance, and he's an Irishman, and his wife is giving birth to young George.
Yep.
And they have to decide
what to name him. George Washington? Oh, that's a lot of letters to go on stage. How about George Michael? George Michael's a great stage name if you're from the 80s. And
yeah, exactly. The little baby holds the American flag, the first thing that it ever wraps its fingers around. And we just have this, like, all the dialogue in this movie is either about show business, it's filtered through show, even the romantic dialogue later with his wife, it's like, that was a pretty good take, let's try another before she kisses him, kind of thing. Or, yay rah, America.
It's nice to be back in the realm of movies where dialogue matters.
Yeah.
I always appreciate that.
Yeah, one line that I noticed early on was just no one was more expectant than my father, except for maybe my mother when she's about to give birth. And then they say, "But Jerry, you'll be late to the next performance." And he says, "My wife has never been late for a performance in her life," or something like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
But
dialogue.
These things could take days. See, they were hinting at something instead of saying, "My wife is pregnant and having a baby."
Yeah. Well, this is
They thought it would be cute to be clever and cute about it, and it was.
Well, probably if people hear us talking about this movie and it doesn't sound that interesting, what they have to understand is 99% of this movie is just the bits of dialogue and business, the in-between stuff, which I always really appreciate. It's like the plot is important, and they have the most generically well-structured plot that you could hope to have in a movie like this. But what's really important is just to make sure the little things, the side characters and the little bits of dialogue and well, actually probably the best example of that is the next major section of the movie, which is George as a 13-year-old idiot. Right. That section goes on for a long time with all these different convoluted I don't know, what would you
you've got, he's going to perform as the kid who
Peck's bad boy.
Yeah, Peck's bad boy, and he's the baddest boy in town. He could lick any boy. And then, he's going to get a big break. But no, he's going to come out. Nope, he's not going to need to be spanked up. He doesn't need to be spanked because he's going to walk outside and get his butt kicked by the boys who are waiting outside to prove that they're better than Peck's bad boy. And then he's still going to get a spanking because
he's going to tell off the producer.
He's going to tell off the producer who's going to come and give them a show in Philly or New York or whichever it was at the time.
Well, actually, the spanking is a really good example of what I'm talking about. It's not just the spanking. It's the dad goes in to, slap him across the face. And she says, not on the face, George. Jerry, he has to sing.
First it's like, it's my job to do it. It's your job to give permission. I give permission. All right. And then, but not on the face. Oh, but not on the, what was
not on the hand. He's got to play the violin. And then he grabs him and says, here's something that doesn't have any talent.
Yeah.
Starts spanking him. Which is a scene you probably wouldn't see today for any number of reasons. But
there's several scenes that you wouldn't see today for any number of reasons.
Well, I think
blackface
before that, we get the blackface, which is kind of a bummer. Just like a random, hey, it's blackface.
Yeah. Or even like just random blackface actors during any given, performance that are just like milling about backstage or whatever.
Yeah. Which is completely realistic, by the way, and I'm glad that they didn't shy away from it. And a lot of people who weren't racists did it. It was just a thing.
Yeah, I mean, Fred Astaire is famously in one of the great blackface scenes of all time, which was a big tribute scene to
a black performer that he really admired and he'd keyed off of and taken from. But now it's, to use a modern word, problematic. And I'm not trying to argue that it's not problematic, by the way. I think the only thing I'm trying to argue is let's leave the movies alone. I think
let's just not go back and edit them. They are what they are. They were what they were.
It's interesting and it's telling. And what's especially interesting and telling is that you didn't have to be a psychopath to wear blackface. So it was just ubiquitous, and it was a really popular type of entertainment during when somebody like George Cohan would have been coming up, minstrel shows, all that stuff. Al Jolson was the most famous blackface performer, and he was arguably the most famous, beloved entertainer of the early 20s. The first sound film that was ever made is called The Jazz Singer, came out in 1927, and it's about Al Jolson and stars Al Jolson. It's just a fact, and it doesn't do to pretend like it wasn't a thing. It's kind of what bugs me about Captain America, where nobody's smoking. I guess it's a kid's movie and nobody has to smoke, but it takes me out of the era that no one's smoking. So yeah, George gets his spanking. It's very lighthearted. I was trying to think of the last time I'd actually seen a spanking in a movie, and I can't think of anything.
Probably some John Wayne movies.
Yeah, John Wayne movies, but yeah. The less said about that, the better. Speaking of different times. And then, skimming through the movie here, there's a lot of little bits of business and montage and stuff. We're seeing George's whole life. But the next major scene is when he meets his wife. Yeah. And he's in old age makeup.
Yep.
And that's probably the most famous scene from this movie.
He's so versatile. He gets to be his mother's father. And so he plays his mother's father on stage in a play, and this beautiful girl comes backstage and, wants to seek out his wise counsel because he's obviously been, doing this sort of thing for a long time. He's very talented, and good old George leans into it and plays the old man, but very slowly gets a little bit more spry and asks her to, she wants to, should she go to New York or not? She knows she can sing and dance. And then he gets her to do a couple numbers for her, and then he jumps up and does a number of his own and blows her away and fakes a heart problem. And
before that, at a certain point, you have a showgirl peek her head in.
That's
and say,
right.
Hey, George, we're
going on a date tonight? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really well-constructed, funny scene. And then he finally when he does burst out his dancing, I think that's the first time you really see Cagney just let loose.
Yeah.
And what did you think of his dancing? Because it's pretty iconic and it's pretty different.
Yeah, well, different is what I thought, and I liked it. Maybe I just liked it for the differentness of it, but I just enjoyed it. Thought it was cool.
Yeah, it's so energetic and just weird. Apparently, Cohen really wanted Astaire to be in the movie, and Astaire turned it down because Astaire said, I'm not your body type. I'm not your style. Like, that's who Cohen wanted. Cohen maybe wanted to grade a
mythologize a little bit more.
But I like have Cagney doing this weird kind of, I don't even know how you describe it. Just his legs just kind of seem disconnected and they go into these weird spastic.
Yeah, it's neat.
Yeah, it's cool. It's just like, I wish I could do that.
And then he eventually peels off all the makeup and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a nice little button. This is what I'm talking about. This is what we're talking about when we say Cagney's just a fun performer. And I'm pretty sure this is something that Cagney added. He throws off the wig and the girl goes, and then he stomps on the wig.
Yeah. Be sure it's dead.
Be sure it's dead. And so, kind of says, there, you see. What do you think about his wife or whatever? Mary, yeah.
She's the quintessential awesome wife type.
Yeah, she reminded me of Mary from...
Me too. From It's a Wonderful Life.
Wonderful Life. Like,
I was awing over her when she's like, oh, I knew when you came home with the flowers.
Oh, yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah, I was like, oh, she's a good wife. She's sweet. Aw. You felt bad for her, but you felt, aw.
Right. And that's definitely mythology because it doesn't actually seem like he was a bad dude. Probably afraid I was going to say is he had like 9 wives and divorced them all and was a serial adulterer. Maybe he still was. I don't know. But he had 2 wives. I think the first one committed adultery on him, was very much a show business type wife. And then he married another woman and stayed with her. So they simplified that and removed the bad wife from the equation and gave him one wife and named her after one of his most famous songs, which I think is all
garbage.
All garbage. But but it's fun garbage.
Yeah.
It's sweet garbage.
Yep.
The section Jake's talking about, he writes the song for her and then he has to give it to the evil.
He writes the song for her but then they've got to go pitch it to the evil starlet who's going to make the film or make the play shine, and his partner is the one that gives it away. And he's like resistant, doesn't even want to play it for...
Oh, you got to hear this song. It's his best song. Just grabs it out of his hands. The partner does. And
no, it's not for her. No, that you don't want it. It's nothing much. No, it's a... But
of course, he poured his heart and soul into it because it's for Mary.
And so, of course, the starlet wants to sing it and thinks it's the most beautiful thing ever. Even though it's one of the ones that I can't really hum off the top of my head.
Her name was Mary, long before it was Marie.
Yeah, there it is. All right. It's all right. You got it. But yeah.
So he comes home to his wife with, hat in hand, flowers, chocolates, trying to get up the nerve to tell her that they landed the big star.
She's inside playing it on the piano and singing
it. rubbing it in.
He comes in, opens the door, hears it, closes the door quietly, and raps really loud so that she'll stop. Yeah, and then she does this whole, I want you to have her, whatever it takes. And then he's like going to tell her, and he finally does. And
I gave away your song, dear. And she says, oh, I know.
I knew that when I saw the flowers.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. What is the difference between corniness in a movie like this that works and corniness that in a Hallmark movie that makes you want to throw up? Why do I like this and not like the Christmas shoes? Is it just the skillfulness with which the corniness is?
I think it's this, just the, it's not sappy. It's not like it's not trying too hard. There's a lot of this movie that doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. It's sentimental, but it's not overly sentimental. And some of it's just like even little things like, and now she's going to go and finish dinner, but there's going to be, wasn't there like a thing like, oh no, something's going to burn? Like,
yeah, she goes out of the room. Yeah, you're right. Like you can imagine the bad version where she says, oh, George, I know.
Yeah.
And then the music
then you linger
swells
on it and then you cut.
He starts to cry or something.
Yeah. And it just stays right there. But instead she's like, oh, dinner's going to burn. And she...
Right. And it's in a wide shot. It's not a series of close-ups telling you how important this is. It's just, it's a nice moment, but they kind of throw it away, which they actually do with a lot of, and by throw away, I just mean they don't call undue attention to it. They just, here it is.
Yep.
Here's the moment.
And the other thing is that Mary had her ups and downs and she was vulnerable, but she was aspiring, but she really, at the end of the day, she got what she wanted. What she wanted was George.
Right.
No big deal. And they didn't make a big deal out of it. Wasn't even like it was a big sacrifice for Mary.
No.
We didn't spend a lot of time. Mary sacrificed a promising career.
She got the song, I got the author, she says.
Yeah.
And it's sweet. And you can't underestimate just the sweetness of Joan Leslie, who plays her. She, much like Donna Reed in It's a Wonderful Life, she brings a lot to it just by being able to just having that quality.
Evoke that. Yeah.
Yeah. That all-American kind of girl next door. Just, she evokes that really well. I did think with that whole section with the evil star that they have to, the evil starlet, that's a real woman. Her name was Faye Templeton. She did help popularize the song Mary. somebody must have really had it in for her. like that would be like if, I don't know what the analogy, like if Julie Andrews died and then somebody made a movie where we had to pitch the song to Julie Andrews and she was like, I don't understand George M. Cohen's music and I'm
above all of
this,
the
sort of thing that the plebeians would like. Or if, Betty White died, or I don't know, Julie Andrews might be too iconic because that would be real. That would be some real iconoclasm to say that Julie Andrews was anything but Maria from Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Even though, spoiler alert, she wasn't Maria from Sound of Music.
True.
But I guess the other interesting thing about this movie is if you think about it being made in 42 and all the stuff happening in the 10s, the 20s, this movie was like the Stranger Things of its time. It's nostalgic for a period that for them was just past. And there's some scene where Cagney runs into a performer from his era, some famous comedian that everybody would have known, the guy that's chomping on a cigar and looking at the poster, and they trade wisecracks about each other.
Yep.
Like, I don't really know who that guy is, but I know he's a guy, and I know that the audience would have been like,
yeah, and he's played up with the lisp and
it's
face that looks like Jim Carrey stole this guy's shtick.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the scene that's in a lot of biopics even to this day. It's like, it's the one time that Johnny Cash met this guy who just happened to be named Elvis. And we get some halfway famous actor come in to do a day as Elvis. Or it's when Ed Wood met Orson Welles. Or, people love that
kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm not above it. I like historical hindsight. Some people think those scenes are corny in movies, and so they are, but I almost always fall for it when it's like, oh yeah, it's the whole movie of Forrest Gump. He just happened to be there when every important thing in the 20th century happened, and he inspired it all.
It all felt like a coincidence and an inevitability at the same time, and yet it was his whole life.
It was his whole life. So this movie does have a couple giant numbers from George Cohen Plays, as played by Cagney, and thousands of extras. We don't have to talk through them all in details, but I think my favorite was it You're a Grand Old Flag, when we suddenly had a black fella singing Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. Yes. And then we had Teddy Roosevelt marching, and then we had Lady Liberty, and then we had Abe Lincoln and somebody saying the Gettysburg Address under Lincoln's monument, and then we
should old acquaintance be forgot? Keep your eye on the grand old flag.
And then we have like hundreds of extras with American flags.
Yep.
Lady Liberty, Uncle Sam, and good old George Cohen right in the center.
It's amazing that it just did not feel much to me.
Right.
I don't know how you put it that way.
I mean,
they were like, what can we pack into this?
Right. Well, and this movie made a lot of money, and I guess the thing to remember is we were in the middle of a war against one Adolf Hitler at the time, and people wanted that much optimism, that much encouragement. You'd never dream of making a movie like that now. Everybody would laugh it out of the theater, but it actually really probably made people cry and moved them, and they that's what people wanted to see back then. I don't know what else. This is not the most plot-driven movie. It's a musical, basically.
We know the end before we get there. I mean, he's going to get the Congressional Medal of Honor, but
I guess there's two more pretty famous things we should talk about. There's the composition of Over There, which is done in the most biopic style of all time, where it's like the most important thing happened.
He's going to go and enlist, and they're not going to let him, and he's going to say that phrase.
Yep. Well, first we got that awesome scene, which I'm sure totally really happened, where the guy's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, you're just too old to be able to enlist now.
Can you guys do this?
And then he tap dances around
jumps up on the desk.
And then all the recruiters and everybody in the office claps for him. The guy says, I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, but we have more need of you here in America.
Those boys over there.
Yeah. He's like, over there. Over there.
Yes.
And that's like,
and then he's going to be walking the streets of Washington thinking, over there, over there. He's going to come along a parade. And then he's going to start harmonizing a melody with
yeah, movie, sure.
with whatever it was they were playing, some Stars and Stripes song.
I can't think of any scenes like this, but off the top of my
and
head.
He's going to go and sit at a piano.
Yeah, and he'll just pound it out. It won't take any work. It'll just be dun 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 dun.
Over there.
I know I've seen these scenes before where someone tells Ray Charles, like, you better hit the road, Jack. And he's like, the road, Jack. Hit the road, Jack. And then he sits down at a piano.
Hit the road, Jack.
I saw neither Bohemian Rhapsody nor Rocket Man, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if that cliche found its way into those movies. And I know it's garbage every time I see it, but I also, you and I both create things for a living, and we know that it's a lot of hard work and it never happens like that.
Yeah.
But I still really like that cliche. I really enjoy the corny.
Oh yeah, you always want it to be the thing that does happen.
Right.
Like, I'm waiting for it to happen.
I mean, maybe every once in a year, it does feel that way, I guess.
Yeah, there will be something that somebody says that you think, oh.
It just clicks for you.
Yeah.
I guess the lie that the movie tells you is, in real life, you've always done months of back-breaking work or weeks or days, or you've spent a lot of time on it, and then one day it can just click for you.
Yeah, and then it all comes together.
But what doesn't happen is you go from zero to the greatest idea of all time that will change the course of the American war. So he writes over there. He pretty much single-handedly saves, I guess they weren't called the Allies in World War I, were they? But we have a montage of all the soldiers fighting and footage from the war, and we hear over there.
Yeah, they're all going to sing over there.
And I guess it was an important song, and the Navy apparently christened a ship after one of George M. Cohan's creations or something like that. Like, it was important.
Yeah.
In the same way that maybe Bing Crosby's White Christmas was important to people in the 40s, all the soldiers that wanted to remember home and remember what they were fighting for. So you've got that scene, and then you've got really the only other famous scene from the movie is something that Cagney improvised, which is he leaves the president's office and he's going down the stairs as a shambling old man, and then he
dances his way down.
Just suddenly starts tap dancing his way down the stairs.
Gets out into the street and joins up with the parade, just like his dad did at the start of the movie. And
what should everybody be singing? But
over there, and he can't. He's too emotional to sing along. And some guy next to him says,
"What's the matter, buddy?
You don't know this song? Why don't I hear you singing?
Right, everybody knows this song.
Come on, sing, speak up." And then he's marching along with the army or whoever it is, singing over there.
Yep, it's great, and we fade to black, and
we all want to go kill some Nazis.
Yep. Which is exactly what this movie was scientifically engineered to make us want to do, and quite effectively. I don't know if there's that much more to say about this movie, but I sort of gave up on talking through the plot because there really isn't a plot. Like the first half where he's sort of coming of his own is fun, but then the movie really is just like the greatest hits from this guy's life.
Yeah.
And there's a part where he gives into the critics and writes a quote unquote important play that
then he has his clever idea of how to be sure that it closes out strong
by apologizing for it to the public.
Everyone's saying that my play stinks, and I'd like to say they're right. It does stink. It's terrible. It's the worst play ever. And that's why it's only going to be running for 3 more nights. I apologize for this.
Yep. I don't know, Jake, is there anything else to say about this movie? Have we successfully communicated to people who maybe haven't seen this movie what's fun about it? I mean, I think when we talk about it, it sounds like it's really corny. And it is, but it doesn't feel corny because it kind of just really pulls it off.
You guys just have to believe us. It doesn't feel corny. I don't know it's not like Gary Cooper's not going to go sit on the hillside and study the Constitution and hear voices and then come back and decide that he can go and kill all the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's cheesy.
No.
Sergeant York is cheesy. I still like Sergeant York.
Yeah, I like all those movies,
or at least
too.
I think I do. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but this is just not that.
No, it has a really acerbic Jewish sense of humor to it. That's probably a lot of it. It's got fast talking Cagney who brings tons of attitude and charm to it that, Gary Cooper or John Wayne or whoever wouldn't.
Yeah, well, he's cut in that mold of, here I go making another dumb comparison, but of like of Humphrey Bogart, of just like, he's a believer, but he's also a little outside of the material, but he's also a believer.
Right.
He's willing to go and Hawk.
Hawk, yeah.
You can't turn huckster into
Hawk.
You can't, yeah. Hucksters hawk things.
Right.
Somebody should invent a tongue twister. Hucksters hawk.
Hucksters hawk horses handily. Hucksters hawk horses handily. It's actually a really easy tongue twister.
Someone can do a better one with hucksters hawk.
Listener, you do it. And hashtag us tongue twister.
Hit us on Instagram or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's going to go sell himself and sell what he's doing.
And Jimmy Cagney, the actor, is doing that the whole time. And he's such a fun performer. You have to see him in something. And this is probably the thing that stands the best outside of its time. And what Roger Ebert compares him to in his review, which would have been a more current reference as the time, is Michael Jordan. He just says, this guy has so much energy, and you can just feel him willing all the other actors to step it up and come to his level of
It is worth
play.
seeing just to see a special performance.
Yeah.
I really think that's true.
And the sports analogy, I think it's a pretty good one. Like one of those athletes, I don't know, Jake, which athlete you'd say it was, but one of those athletes that just is obviously outshining everybody and is pushing everybody and impatient with everybody, actually.
Yeah, and that is what Jordan is known for, is like, I am the best, and I will all of you up to my level.
Mm-hmm.
It's not I'm going to serve you
right
and make us all better. That's Bill Russell. Bill Russell is, I'm going to figure out how to get the best out of everybody by motivating you and knowing what.
Mm-hmm.
But Michael Jordan is just sort of like, I am so good, you'd better keep up with me. Don't you dare disappoint me or let me down.
And Cagney has a little bit of that, like, I'm going to act you under the table, and I'm going to steal this scene from you unless you figure out something.
Yeah, some way to earn your place next to me in this scene.
And it doesn't come off as arrogant or anything like that. It just comes off as an aggressively potent talent. I don't know how else to put it.
So I saw this because I did look him up on Wikipedia in 1999 when the AFI ranked these. They ranked him the 8th among its list of greatest male stars. Orson Welles famously called Cagney, quote, the greatest actor who ever appeared in front of a camera, end quote. That's Orson Welles talking. So
he might be one of my favorites. I mean, he is intensely fun and interesting to watch, and funny and cool and modern, for lack of a better word. Like his shtick translates to now in a way that, it's rat-a-tat, it's old-timey, but it doesn't feel antiquated. It doesn't feel like...
He was a vaudeville dancer and comedian.
Yeah. Well, that makes so much sense.
And, that's how you got to start.
If you like this movie, then I might recommend White Heat, as I said, The Roaring Twenties, Angels with Dirty Faces. These are all some of his great gangster performances. Public Enemy is his most famous. It's also...
Angels with Dirty Faces, Angels with Filthy Souls is the name of the Home Alone thing.
Yeah.
There you go.
These are all really fun movies, and mostly they're okay gangster programmers that are just brought to electrifying life by the fact that he's in them. A little bit like, I don't know, we're going to make a generic Orlando Bloom pirate movie, and then Johnny Depp's going to come in and do something that...
Turn it into something...
At least at the time.
Special, and then...
Then we're going to... Yeah, imagine if a performer did that kind of thing and then they didn't run into the ground. Although, I guess Cagney started resenting those gangster roles, so maybe he felt like they were running it into the ground too. Sunrise, sunset, circle of life, etc., etc. But he's a really special performer, and if you haven't seen him, you owe it to yourself. And if you're not interested in gangsters, then...
This is just a good one to see.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it will make you want to stand up and salute America.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. Thanks for listening to Sandy at the Movies. We'll be back next time with Cinderella. Looking forward to that. This podcast has been produced by me, executive produced by Jake and me. Until next time.
My mother thanks you, my father thanks you, my sister thanks you, and I thank you.